The Israeli government has one official narrative of what happened on October 7th. Of course, the slaughter of 1,400 innocent Israelis at the hands of Hamas. But now, startling new testimony is starting to emerge that may change what we understand about that day. This could trouble a lot of people. Dan Cohen is the founder of Uncaptured Media, a filmmaker, the documentary Killing Gaza, with some of these new startling revelations. Dan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, great to be with you, Clayton.
So, what testimony has started to emerge from Israelis that could shed new light on what happened that day?
Well, in the days after the events of October 7th, an interview with a survivor of the kibbutz Be'eri, the Israeli kibbutz Be'eri, where many people died, gave an interview in Israeli media. And she said, she was very clear that, and repeated in her interview, that Israeli hostages were killed by Israeli gunfire, perhaps in a firefight between the Hamas fighters and Israeli military, but that it was Israeli military bullets that actually killed them.
בגינה של האנשים מהקיבוץ שיש 5 בני ערובה ששוכבים או 6 על האדמה בחוץ, ממש כצאן לטבח מול הירי של הימ"מ שלנו והמחבלים.
הטרוריסטים ירו בהם?
לא, הם נהרגו מהחילופי ירי, תבין שהיה חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים.
זאת אומרת, יכול להיות שזה כוחותינו ירו בהם? כשניסו לחסל את החוטפים, את
החמאס? כן, חיסלו את כולם, כולל בני ערובה, כי היה שם חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים. אני משוחררת בסביבות השעה 5:30, ב8:30 כנראה מסתיימת הלחימה, אחרי שהיה חילופי אש מטורפים, אפילו 2 פקזים של טנק שירו לתוך הבית, שזה בית קיבוצי קטן, זה לא איזה, רואים את זה בחדשות.
כן.
זה לא מקום גדול. וברגע הזה כולם נהרגו, היה שקט חוץ מניצולה אחת שיצאה הדס דגן, וזהו, וגם.
איך כולם נהרגו?
מהחילופי אש.
מהחילופי אש, כלומר יכול להיות שגם זה מאש כוחותינו?
חד משמעית.
כן?
וככה אני מאמינה.
אוי, זה נשמע כל כך רע.
כן, וכולם מתו.
So that interview was actually censored by the Israeli government in order to prevent it from getting to the Israeli public, which had basically been through this shock and awe propaganda campaign to convince them that everything that just happened on October 7th was purely a Hamas terrorist attack, that Hamas is worse than ISIS, and so there can be no negotiation, and the only answer is to obliterate Gaza, and whatever happened in those horrible scenes on that horrible day of October 7th is purely the fault of Hamas and has nothing to do with Israeli military tactics or strategy or decisions that were made either on the fly that day. Now, there has been another article that came out in the Israeli liberal magazine Haaretz, in which it cites an Israeli military figure who was there. There was one who was in a bunker near Gaza, who was trying to call in airstrikes on this kibbutz, of course, which would have killed everybody. That did not happen. However, what did happen is another Israeli commander who was on the scene actually ordered his men, his soldiers, to open fire on everyone in these houses. So the Hamas militants were inside these houses with Israeli hostages, under the belief, apparently, that because they have hostages, they'd be able to get back into Gaza, as others had. But the Israeli military, this commander, and we don't know how high up this decision-making goes, decided, no, we're going to kill everyone in here, including with use of tank shells. This is according to this Haaretz article. So, I mean, what actually happened, clearly, is the Israeli military said, we are not going to negotiate with Hamas at all, and we're going to kill everyone here, including our own people. Now, this has been pretty much hidden from the Israeli public as best as possible with the censorship of that interview. Yasmin Porat is the survivor's name, and with but now that has been published in Haaretz. So I mean, it raises way more questions about what actually happened, not only in Be'eri but in other places too, where many Israelis were killed. And that's not to say that Hamas did not kill people. Definitely that happened. But Israel apparently clearly killed its own people in order to avoid negotiations.
So a couple of questions here, right? Because immediately people would say, well, obviously, all right, well, come on, Dan, this has got to be friendly fire, right? That there was clearly, it was probably friendly fire. And in the scuffle of the moment, the Israeli military dealing with Hamas terrorists, which just invaded and were carrying out this brutal attack, that yes, clearly there was going to be people killed accidentally, that it would have been friendly fire. How do they address that piece of it?
Well, according to this Haaretz article, and I'll just read exactly what he says. This is according to Nir Hasson, the Israeli journalist. He says, and he's quoting a resident of the Be'eri who survived. He says, after commanders in the field made difficult decisions, including shelling houses with all their occupants inside in order to eliminate the terrorists along with the hostages, did the IDF complete the takeover of the kibbutz. The price was terrible. At least 112 Be'eri people were killed. So there's also another part of this article there's another one on October 11th that that quotes a guy named Erez, a deputy commander, and he says they fought inside the kibbutz from house to house with the tanks. We had no choice. So they're actually firing tank shells. It's not as if there was, I mean, there was clearly close combat, and maybe some of them were killed by friendly fire, in combat, in gun battles between Hamas and the Israeli forces. And that seems to be what Yasmin Porat, the first one to come out and give her testimony, was describing. However,
so she came out and said that it was friendly fire. That's what she was describing.
She was saying that yes, that Israelis were killed by Israeli gunfire, not that the Israeli military decided pure only to kill their own people, but so basically at first what we learned from her testimony is that best case scenario is that it was friendly fire, in a clash between the two sides. But later, with the publication of these other articles, what became clear is the Israeli military made a decision in the field to kill everyone there using tank shells and just opening fire on the houses where Hamas was holding these hostages. We have to look at this in context of something called the Hannibal Directive, which is an Israeli military procedure to kill any Israeli soldier taken captive by enemy forces. So in 2014, this was implemented in the 51-day war on Gaza in the southern city of Rafah, where Hamas had managed to take captive an Israeli soldier named Hadar